The late afternoon sun dipped low over Seattle-Tacoma International Airport, painting the sky in streaks of orange and gold that filtered through the towering glass windows of Terminal C. The concourse thrummed with the restless energy of travelers' families wrestling with overstuffed suitcases, business people barking into their phones, and the occasional sharp cry of an overtired toddler cutting through the din. Amid this orchestrated chaos stood Ethan Carter, a wiry 14-year-old with a tousled mop of chestnut hair and sharp hazel eyes that darted with curiosity. His backpack, slung carelessly over one shoulder, sagged under the weight of tech magazines, a dog-eared notebook, and a battered laptop adorned with stickers from coding camps and hackathons. This wasn't just any trip. Ethan was bound for Chicago, his first solo flight to attend the Tech Trend Expo, a mecca for young innovators like him. The window seat he'd secured months ago in row 12, seat A, was his small slice of control in the unpredictable world of air travel, a perch to dream code and watch the world shrink below. Ethan's sneakers squeaked against the polished floor as he navigated the boarding line at gate C-17, his boarding pass clutched like a talisman. He'd spent weeks preparing for the expo, where he planned to pitch his latest project, a mobile app that optimized public transit routes using real-time data scraped from city APIs. The app was his baby born from late nights hunched over his laptop, fueled by energy drinks and the thrill of cracking complex problems. The window seat wasn't just a seat. It was his sanctuary for the 5-hour flight, a place to sketch algorithms and imagine his app revolutionizing commutes. As the gate agent scanned his pass, Ethan flashed a quick smile, his braces catching the fluorescent light. "Enjoy your flight," the agent said, her voice robotic from repetition. Ethan nodded already, picturing the clouds rolling by at 30,000 feet, his notebook open to a fresh page. Inside the plane, the cabin was a cramped maze of activity. The air carried the faint tang of coffee and the stale hum of recycled ventilation. Passengers jostled for overhead bin space, their voices a low rumble of complaints about tight connections and misplaced bags. Ethan threaded through the aisle, counting rows until he reached 12A. The window seat was empty, just as he'd hoped, the small oval window framing a glimpse of the tarmac, where ground crew scurried like ants. He slid his backpack under the seat, settled in, and buckled his seatbelt with a satisfying click. His fingers traced the armrest, and he leaned toward the window, catching the glint of a baggage cart trundling past. This was it. His adventure was beginning, a solo journey to prove he was more than just a kid with a laptop. A few rows back in 15C, James Carter sat quietly, his laptop balanced on the flimsy tray table. A software engineer with a reserved demeanor, James had the look of someone who spent his days untangling code and his evenings avoiding small talk. His dark hair was streaked with early gray, and his glasses sat low on his nose as he glanced over at Ethan. He'd booked a separate seat to give his son space, a deliberate choice to honor Ethan's push for independence. James wasn't one for grand gestures, but watching Ethan navigate the airport alone stirred a quiet pride tempered by a flicker of unease. What if something went wrong? He adjusted his glasses and tried to focus on his laptop, though his eyes kept drifting to the back of Ethan's head, where a stray curl stuck out defiantly. The cabin filled steadily, the air growing thick with the rustle of jackets and the clatter of luggage. Ethan was lost in his thoughts, sketching a new algorithm in his notebook, a tweak to his app's routing logic, when a shadow loomed over him. He looked up to see a flight attendant standing in the aisle, her navy blue uniform crisp and her name tag gleaming, Sarah Mitchell. She was in her late 30s, with sharp features and a tight bun that seemed to pull her expression into a permanent frown. Her eyes locked onto Ethan, and her voice carried the clipped authority of someone used to being obeyed. "Excuse me, young man," Sarah said, her tone more command than request. "You're in seat 12A, correct?" Ethan nodded, his brow furrowing slightly. "Yeah, that's me. I booked it a while ago." He patted his boarding pass tucked into his hoodie pocket, as if to reassure himself it was still there. Sarah's lips pressed into a thin line, her posture rigid. "I'm going to need you to move to another seat. This one's been reassigned." Ethan blinked, caught off guard. "Reassigned? But I picked this seat when I booked my ticket. It's confirmed, right here." He fished out his boarding pass, the printed 12A bold and unmistakable, and held it up for her to see. Sarah didn't glance at it. "We have a priority passenger who needs this seat," she said, her voice firm like a teacher shutting down a debate. "It's airline policy. There's an open seat in 22B. You can take that one." Ethan's stomach twisted, a mix of confusion and indignation rising in his chest. He'd spent weeks dreaming of this flight of the view from the window as he jotted down ideas for his app. Now, this woman was telling him to give it up without so much as an explanation. He straightened in his seat, his voice steady but polite. "I'm sorry, but I don't understand. I paid for this seat. I booked it months ago. Why does someone else get it?" Sarah's eyes narrowed, a flicker of impatience crossing her face. "It's not your place to question airline decisions, young man. We have policies to ensure everyone's accommodated. Now, please, gather your things and move to 22B. The passengers nearby began to take notice. A woman in 12C, her hair pulled into a sleek ponytail, paused her scrolling on her phone, glancing sideways with a mix of curiosity and annoyance. An older man across the aisle in 12D craned his neck, his bushy eyebrows raised in interest. In 15C, James looked up from his laptop, his fingers hovering over the keys. He could hear the edge in Sarah's voice, and his jaw tightened. Ethan was handling himself well, but James felt a protective instinct stirring, like a program kicking into debug mode. Still, he stayed put, trusting Ethan to navigate this on his own for now. Ethan's cheeks flushed, but he kept his composure, his voice calm despite the heat rising in his chest. "Can you at least tell me why this passenger gets priority? I mean, I followed all the rules. I checked in early, picked my seat, everything. Doesn't that matter?" Sarah crossed her arms, her posture stiffening like a firewall locking down. "The airline reserves the right to reassign seats as needed. You're holding up boarding. If you don't comply, I'll have to escalate this to the captain, and you may be removed from the flight." The word removed hit Ethan like a bug in his code, unexpected and infuriating. Removed for sitting in the seat he'd rightfully booked, his heart raced, but he wasn't about to back down. He leaned forward, his voice still polite but edged with resolve. "I'm not trying to cause trouble, but this isn't fair. If there's a policy, can you show it to me, or maybe talk to the gate agent?" They confirmed my seat when I boarded. Sarah's face hardened, her patience visibly fraying. "I don't have time to debate this with you. Move to 22B or I'll call security." The cabin grew quieter, the tension rippling outward like a glitch spreading through a system. Passengers exchanged glances, some whispering, others openly staring. The woman in 12C muttered something about kids these days, her tone dripping with judgment, while the man in 12D shook his head, clearly siding with Ethan. James's fingers curled into a fist, his laptop forgotten. He wanted to stand up, to tell Sarah to back off, to demand an explanation himself. But he held back, his eyes fixed on Ethan. His son wasn't a little kid anymore. James had seen him debug code that stumped senior engineers, rewrite algorithms in half the time it took his colleagues. If anyone could handle a pushy flight attendant, it was Ethan. Or so he hoped. Ethan took a deep breath, his mind racing like a processor churning through data. He wasn't just going to roll over, not when he knew he was right. His fingers brushed against his phone in his hoodie pocket, and an idea sparked, bright and electric. He'd spent years tinkering with systems, finding loopholes in code, outsmarting bugs that others overlooked. Maybe there was a way to outsmart this situation, too. He looked up at Sarah, his hazel eyes steady, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "Can I make a quick call before I move? It'll take 2 seconds." Sarah hesitated clearly, thrown by the request. A call to who? Her tone was skeptical, as if she suspected he was stalling. "My dad Ethan said," though he had no intention of calling James. He pulled out his phone, his fingers moving with the practiced speed of someone who'd coded under pressure before. "I just need to let him know what's going on." Sarah sighed, glancing at the growing line of passengers still boarding behind her. Their grumbles were growing louder, and she was clearly eager to keep things moving. "Fine. Make it quick. But you're moving to 22B as soon as you're done." Ethan nodded, already dialing a number. It wasn't James's. It was Lucas, his best friend from coding club, a 15-year-old whiz who'd once helped Ethan hack their school's scheduling system not to cause trouble, just to prove they could. Lucas picked up on the second ring, his voice crackling with excitement. "Yo, Ethan, what's up? You on the plane yet? How's it feel to be a big-shot solo traveler?" Ethan kept his voice low, cupping the phone to his ear. "Lucas, listen. I need you to check something for me. You still got that script we used to scrape the school's scheduling system?" Lucas laughed, the sound muffled by the clatter of his keyboard in the background. "Dude, you're on a plane and you're talking about scripts. What's going on?" Ethan glanced at Sarah, who was now directing another passenger to their seat, but still watching him out of the corner of her eye. "I'm in my seat 12A, but they're trying to kick me out for some VIP. I think it's a glitch in their booking system. Can you pull up the airline's public API? Look for anything weird with seat assignments on Flight 472 to Chicago." Lucas whistled low and impressed. "You're bold, man. Like, next-level bold. Give me a sec, I'm on my laptop. You sure about this? I mean, this is an airline." "I'm sure," Ethan said, his voice steady, but his pulse racing. "Just check the API. Look for overbooking patterns or priority flags that don't add up. If I'm right, there's something off with their system." "On it," Lucas said, his tone shifting to the focused intensity they both got when diving into a coding puzzle. "Give me 2 minutes. Don't get kicked off the plane, okay?" Ethan smirked, slipping his phone back into his pocket as Sarah turned her attention back to him. "Done?" she asked, her arms crossed again. Almost, Ethan said, buying time. He could feel the weight of the other passengers' eyes, the hum of the cabin, the faint vibration of the plane as the ground crew finished their preparations outside. Somewhere behind him, James was watching his silence a quiet vote of confidence. Ethan didn't know exactly what Lucas would find, but he had a hunch. Airlines ran on complex systems, databases, algorithms, APIs, and complex systems always had flaws. He'd spent years finding those flaws, exploiting them, not for chaos, but for understanding. If he could find one now, maybe he could turn this around. As Lucas's keyboard clacked faintly through the phone, Ethan leaned back in 12A, his window seat, and stared out at the tarmac. The baggage cart was gone, replaced by the slow crawl of a fuel truck, its lights blinking in the fading daylight. He wasn't just fighting for a seat anymore. This was about fairness, about standing up when someone tried to push you down. And if he played it right, Sarah Mitchell and her mysterious priority passenger were about to learn just how far a 14-year-old with a phone, a plan, and a knack for code could go. The cabin of Flight 472 to Chicago was a pressure cooker of murmurs and restless energy, the air thick with the scent of jet fuel seeping through the vents and the low hum of the auxiliary power unit. Ethan Carter sat in 12A, his window seat, his phone pressed to his ear, the faint clack of Lucas's keyboard, a lifeline in the chaos. Outside, the Seattle tarmac shimmered in the fading light. Ground crew weaving between service vehicles like figures in a choreographed dance. Inside, the tension from his standoff with Sarah Mitchell, the flight attendant lingered like static. Passengers nearby stole glances. Some sympathetic, others annoyed their whispers, forming a jagged undercurrent to the boarding process. Ethan's hazel eyes flicked to the window, catching the reflection of his own determined face. He wasn't just a kid in over his head. He was a coder, a problem solver, and he was about to prove it. In 15C, James Carter sat rigid. His laptop screen dimmed, his attention fixed on Ethan. His son's calm defiance in the face of Sarah's authority had sparked a mix of pride and worry in him. James had spent his career navigating systems, software, corporate, bureaucratic, and he knew how easily they could bend under pressure or break under scrutiny. Ethan's request for a phone call had raised his suspicions. He recognized that glint in his son's eyes, the same one he'd seen when Ethan had reverse-engineered their home router at age 12. James adjusted his glasses, his fingers itching to intervene, but he held back. Ethan had earned this moment, and James trusted him to see it through, even if the stakes were unclear. On the other end of the call, Lucas's voice crackled through Ethan's phone, urgent but focused. "Okay, dude, I'm in," Lucas said, his words punctuated by rapid keystrokes. "The airline's public API is a mess, barely documented, full of deprecated endpoints. But I found something. Their seat assignment system has a priority override for VIPs, and it's glitchy as hell. Looks like it's double booking seats when it shouldn't. Flight 472's got like 3 passengers flagged as priority for 12A alone. That's why they're trying to boot you." Ethan's pulse quickened. His hunch confirmed. "Can you trace it?" "Figure out why it's happening, already on it," Lucas said. "There's a debug log in the API, sloppy, they didn't even secure it. It's showing a batch update from their Dallas hub that pushed the VIP flags. Hang on, I'm running a script to cross-check the booking IDs." A pause, then a low whistle. "Whoa, Ethan, this is big. The system's been overbooking VIP seats across all their flights today. It's not just you, it's a systemic bug." Ethan's mind raced, piecing together the implications. A bug like that could ripple outward, affecting hundreds of passengers, maybe thousands. He glanced at Sarah, who was now at the front of the cabin, speaking sharply to a colleague about boarding delays. "Lucas, can you trigger an alert? Something to flag the bug to their ops team without, crashing everything?" Lucas chuckled, a mix of nerves and excitement. "You're walking a tightrope, man. I can send a diagnostic ping through their API, make it look like a routine error report. It'll light up their system like a Christmas tree, but it won't point back to us." "You sure do it?" Ethan said, his voice low but firm. "And hurry. I've got about 30 seconds before this flight attendant loses it." "On it," Lucas said, and the line went quiet, save for the furious clacking of his keyboard. Meanwhile, 500 miles away in Dallas, the nerve center of SkyVista Airlines buzzed with the controlled chaos of a major hub. The operations floor was a sprawling grid of monitors, headsets, and bleary-eyed staff juggling flight schedules, crew assignments, and passenger complaints. At a corner desk, Priya Sharma, a senior systems analyst, stared at her screen where a dashboard of green and yellow indicators tracked the airline's booking system. She'd been troubleshooting minor glitches all day, nothing unusual for a Saturday evening with a full slate of flights. But as she sipped her coffee, a red alert flashed across her screen, urgent and unyielding: "Critical error seat allocation conflict detected. System integrity compromised." Priya frowned, setting her mug down. "What the hell?" she muttered, clicking into the alert. The error log pointed to a cascade of overbooked seats with Flight 472 to Chicago as the epicenter. The system had flagged multiple priority assignments for single seats, creating a domino effect of reassignments that threatened to delay departures across the network. Priya's fingers flew across her keyboard, pulling up the API logs. "This shouldn't be happening," she said to her colleague Marcus, who leaned over from the next desk. "What's up?" Marcus asked, peering at her screen. "Another glitch." "Not just a glitch," Priya said, her voice tight. "The priority override is misfiring. It's trying to reassign booked seats to VIPs who don't even have confirmed tickets. If this propagates, we could ground half the fleet until it's fixed." Back on the plane, Sarah Mitchell was losing patience. She marched back to 12A, her heels clicking against the carpeted aisle. "Time's up," she said, her voice sharp enough to cut through the cabin's hum. "You've had your call. Move to 22B now, or I'm calling security." Ethan slipped his phone into his pocket, his expression calm despite the adrenaline coursing through him. "I'm not moving," he said, meeting her gaze. "I booked this seat. You haven't shown me any proof it's reassigned. If there's a problem, it's with your system, not me." Sarah's face flushed, her authority challenged in front of a growing audience. The woman in 12C snorted, muttering, "Kids these days," while the man in 12D leaned forward, his voice low but clear. "He's got a point, lady. Show him the policy or let him stay." Other passengers nodded, their murmurs growing bolder. A young woman in 13B piped up, "Yeah, why's he gotta move? He's just a kid." The cabin was turning, the tide of opinion shifting in Ethan's favor. Sarah's jaw tightened, but before she could respond, her walkie-talkie crackled to life. "Sarah, we've got a problem," a voice said, urgent and distorted. "Ops just called. The booking system's down some kind of error. They're halting boarding until it's resolved. Stay put and keep the passengers calm." Sarah's eyes widened, her composure cracking. "Down? What do you mean? Down?" She stepped away, speaking rapidly into her walkie-talkie, her voice fading into the galley. Ethan leaned back in his seat, a small smile tugging at his lips. Lucas had done it. The ping had hit its mark, and now the airline was scrambling. In Dallas, Priya's screen was a battlefield of alerts. The diagnostic ping, Lucas's handiwork, though she didn't know, it had triggered a fail-safe in the booking system, locking it down to prevent further conflicts. Flights across the country were frozen, boarding gates stalled, and check-in counters swamped with frustrated passengers. Priya traced the error to a faulty update pushed that morning, a sloppy patch meant to prioritize VIPs for a new loyalty program. "This is a nightmare," she said, her fingers flying as she tried to isolate the bug. "If we don't fix this in the next hour, we're looking at a $2.5 billion hit, delays, refunds, you name it." Marcus whistled, leaning back in his chair. "Who triggered the alert? That ping came out of nowhere." "No idea," Priya said, her eyes narrowing. "But it's almost too precise. Like someone knew exactly where to poke the system." On the plane, the mood was shifting from tense to restless. Passengers checked their watches, their phones, their patience wearing thin. The woman in 12C was now openly complaining to her seatmate, blaming that kid for the delay, though she had no proof. The man in 12D, however, caught Ethan's eye and gave him a subtle nod, as if to say, "Keep going, kid." James in 15C overheard snippets of the passengers' chatter, words like system crash and booking error floating through the cabin. His engineer's mind clicked into gear, connecting the dots. Ethan's call hadn't been to him, but to someone who could pull strings James hadn't even considered. He felt a surge of pride, tempered by a growing unease. What had Ethan set in motion Ethan's phone buzzed with a text from Lucas. Ping worked. Systems locked. They're freaking out. You're welcome. What now? Ethan typed back quickly. Sit tight. Let them figure it out. Tex. He slipped his phone away, his heart pounding, but his face calm. He'd bought himself time, maybe more. The airline's system was down. Sarah was distracted, and 12A was still his. But the scale of it, the frozen flights, the chaos in Dallas, was bigger than he'd expected. He glanced out the window where the fuel truck was pulling away its lights, fading into the dusk. This wasn't just about a seat anymore. It was about exposing a flaw, about holding a giant accountable. But as the cabin grew louder with complaints, Ethan felt a twinge of doubt. Had he gone too far? Sarah returned, her face pale, her bun slightly askew. Everyone, please remain seated, she announced, her voice strained. We're experiencing a technical issue with our booking system. We'll update you soon. Her eyes flicked to Ethan, a mix of suspicion and frustration, but she said nothing more and retreated to the galley. James leaned forward, catching Ethan's eye for the first time. He didn't speak, but his look said everything. I know you're behind this. Be careful. Ethan gave a small nod, his resolve hardening. He hadn't meant to ground a $2.5 billion operation, but he wasn't sorry either. The airline had tried to push him out to prioritize someone else without reason. Now they were paying the price for their broken system. As the plane sat idle on the tarmac, Ethan's fingers twitched, itching to open his notebook and code something, anything, to make sense of the chaos he'd unleashed. The engines of Flight 472 roared to life, their deep rumble vibrating through the cabin as the plane taxied away from the gate at Seattle-Tacoma International Airport. The delay, stretching nearly 2 hours, had turned the once bustling atmosphere into a cauldron of frustration, impatience, and restless sighs. Passengers shifted uncomfortably, checking watches and phones, their murmurs a constant hum beneath the captain's apologetic voice crackling over the intercom. Folks, thank you for your patience during this technical issue. We're cleared for takeoff now, and we'll do our best to make up time en route to Chicago. Ethan Carter, still anchored in 12A, his hard-won window seat, gazed out at the runway lights blurring into streaks as the plane surged forward. Seattle's skyline shrank below, swallowed by the inky sky, and Ethan exhaled a mix of relief and unease settling in his chest. The chaos he'd unleashed was behind him, or so he hoped, but its weight lingered like a glitch in his code that refused to resolve cleanly. In the galley, Sarah Mitchell moved with practiced efficiency, preparing for beverage service, but her usual composure was frayed at the edges. The system outage had sent shockwaves through SkyVista Airlines, and calls from headquarters had flooded her walkie-talkie demanding answers about the seat reassignment fiasco on her flight. She'd learned to her chagrin that the priority passenger, a mid-level executive who'd waved a loyalty card at the gate, had no legitimate claim to Ethan's seat. The booking system's glitch had fabricated the override, a digital error, born from rushed code and untested updates pushed to accommodate a new VIP loyalty program. Sarah's cheeks flushed as she recalled her sharp words to Ethan, a 14-year-old who'd stood his ground with more poise than many adults she'd encountered. Glancing toward row 12, she saw him scribbling in his notebook, his face lit by the soft glow of the window, his hazel eyes reflecting a quiet determination. She owed him an apology, but pride and protocol held her tongue. The words stuck like a syntax error in her mind. She busied herself with trays of snacks, mentally rehearsing what she'd say when the moment felt right. In Dallas, SkyVista Airlines headquarters buzzed with frenetic energy. The operations floor, a sprawling grid of glowing monitors, blinking headsets, and bleary-eyed staff, was a battleground of controlled chaos. Priya Sharma, a senior systems analyst with a reputation for untangling digital messes, stood at the center of it, her eyes locked on a dashboard flashing red alerts like warning lights on a failing server. The system freeze, triggered by Ethan's diagnostic ping, though she didn't know its source, had halted 150 flights, stranding thousands of passengers and costing an estimated $2.5 billion in delays, refunds, and reputational damage. "This wasn't a fluke," Priya said, her voice cutting through the chatter of her team. "That ping hit our weakest spot, seat allocation overrides." Someone out there knew exactly where to look. Her colleague Marcus, hunched over a neighboring terminal, scrolled through API logs, his brow furrowed. "No breach, but it's clean work," he said. "Public endpoint, no credentials needed. Whoever did this exposed a flaw we should have caught months ago." Priya nodded, her fingers flying across her keyboard as she isolated the bug, a sloppy patch from a recent loyalty program update that prioritized VIPs without cross-checking confirmed bookings. The error had created a cascade of overbookings, mislabeling passengers, and triggering reassignments across the airline's network. "We need a full overhaul," she told her team, her tone urgent but measured. "Stronger encryption, real-time auditing, and no more blind overrides." This could have been catastrophic if it went unchecked. Upstairs in a glass-walled conference room, the CEO convened an emergency meeting, his face grim as he reviewed the financial fallout. "This is a wake-up call," he declared, slamming a fist on the table. "We're implementing new protocols, mandatory staff training on fairness, transparent seat assignments, and a system rebuild from the ground up. We can't afford another hit like this, not financially, not publicly." As Flight 472 leveled off at 30,000 feet, the seatbelt sign dinged off, and the cabin stirred to life. Passengers stretched opened books or tapped at screens trying to reclaim normalcy after the delay. Ethan unbuckled his seatbelt and leaned back, his notebook open to a page of half-finished algorithms for his transit app, though his mind was elsewhere. His phone buzzed with a text from Lucas. "You're viral, dude. Airline outage all over X. They're calling it the Seatgate scandal." "Legend status confirmed," Ethan smirked, but the thrill was tempered by a growing unease. He'd saved his seat, exposed a flaw, but the ripple effects, delayed flights, missed connections, frustrated families gnawed at him. Had he fixed an injustice or created a bigger mess? He glanced back toward row 15, where his father, James Carter, sat with his laptop open, though his eyes were fixed on Ethan, a silent question in his gaze that carried both pride and caution. James stood excusing himself past the passenger in 15B, a harried businessman still grumbling about his delayed meeting. He squeezed down the aisle and slid into the empty middle seat next to Ethan, his voice low but warm. "That was quite the move you pulled," he said, a hint of a smile softening his usual stoic demeanor. "I pieced it together when the system crashed." "Lucas?" "Right. You two and your coding club antics never cease to amaze me." Ethan nodded, a touch sheepish, his fingers fidgeting with the edge of his notebook. "Yeah, we just wanted to flag the glitch. Didn't expect it to ground half the airline. It got big." James adjusted his glasses, his engineer's mind turning over the implications like a debugger parsing code. "You stood up for what was right, Ethan, and I'm proud of that. Systems, whether it's code or people, need to be challenged when they're unfair. You saw a flaw, and you acted, which is more than most people would do. But you saw what happened. Those delays affected thousands of people, missing weddings, job interviews, family reunions. Your gift for finding flaws is powerful, but it comes with a responsibility to think about the human cost, not just the technical win." Ethan stared out the window, the stars glittering like scattered data points across a vast black canvas. "I know," he said softly, his voice barely audible over the hum of the engines. "It started with the seat, but it snowballed. Sarah was just following orders, I guess, but it felt so wrong. I wanted to prove a point that a kid like me could make them listen." James rested a hand on Ethan's shoulder, his grip firm but gentle. "You did prove it. You made a giant like Sky Vista rethink how they treat people. But next time try words before code. Or at least give me a heads up so I can brace myself for the fallout." He chuckled, easing the tension, his eyes crinkling with a warmth Ethan rarely saw. "You're growing up fast, kid. Use that brain of yours to build solutions, not just expose problems. The world needs more builders." Their conversation paused as Sarah approached, her navy blue uniform slightly wrinkled from the chaotic flight. She carried a tray with sodas, pretzels, and a few packs of cookies, her expression softer, almost vulnerable, a stark contrast to the authoritative figure who'd demanded Ethan's seat hours earlier. "Excuse me," she said, looking directly at Ethan, her voice quieter than before. "I owe you an apology. The seat reassignment was a mistake, a system error. You were right to question it, and I was wrong to push you the way I did. I'm sorry." Ethan blinked, caught off guard by her sincerity. He'd expected her to double down, not back off. "Thanks," he said, his voice genuine, a small smile tugging at his lips. "I didn't mean to cause all this trouble. I just wanted my seat." Sarah shook her head, a faint smile breaking through her usual stern demeanor. "You didn't cause it. Our system did. I got word from headquarters they're changing protocols because of this. No more arbitrary reassignments, and they're fixing the tech side to prevent another mess like this. You helped shine a light on something we should have caught." She offered him a soda and a bag of pretzels. "On the house. Enjoy Chicago, and good luck at that expo." As she walked away, Ethan turned to James, a grin creeping onto his face. "See? It worked out." James raised an eyebrow, his expression a mix of amusement and caution. "This time. But every hack has a ripple effect, Ethan. Choose your targets wisely, and always think 2 steps ahead." The flight landed in Chicago under a canopy of stars, the city's skyline a dazzling grid of lights that reminded Ethan of a circuit board pulsing with possibilities. He and James deplaned together, the tension of the journey giving way to the quiet camaraderie of shared experience. They navigated O'Hare's crowded terminal, weaving through throngs of travelers, and checked into their hotel near McCormick Place, where the Tech Trend Expo awaited. Ethan barely slept, his mind buzzing with anticipation for the next day's presentation, though James's words about responsibility echoed like a background process he couldn't shut down. The next morning, the expo hall was a whirlwind of innovation, a technicolor maze of booths showcasing drones zipping overhead, VR headsets glowing with immersive worlds, and apps promising to reshape everything from healthcare to urban planning. Ethan, dressed in his best jeans and a slightly wrinkled button-up, felt a surge of nerves as he stepped into the Young Innovators panel. His transit app, a tool to optimize public transit routes using real-time data, was his ticket to this stage. But the story of Flight 472 stole the spotlight. Standing before a crowd of peers, mentors, and tech scouts, Ethan gripped the microphone, his braces glinting under the stage lights, his hazel eyes scanning the room. "So I was on this flight to get here," he began, his voice steady despite the butterflies in his stomach. "They tried to take my seat for a VIP who didn't exist in the system, a glitch in their booking software. Instead of giving up, I called a friend, and we dug into the airline's public API. We found a flaw, overbooked seats, bad overrides, and sent a diagnostic ping to flag it. It caused a huge delay. Yeah, grounding flights across the country, but it forced the airline to face their broken system. The audience leaned in a mix of teens in hoodies and tech, mentors in blazers hanging on his words. A girl in the front row, her hair streaked with purple, raised her hand, her voice sharp with curiosity. Was it worth it? All that chaos for one seat. Ethan paused, James's advice echoing in his mind like a well-placed comment in his code. It wasn't just about the seat, he said, his tone thoughtful. It was about fairness. Systems, tech, airlines, schools should work for everyone, not just the loudest or richest. But I learned something: big actions have consequences. My ping grounded flights messed up people's plans, real people, not just data points. It made the airline fix their system, but I could have handled it better, maybe worked with them instead of against them. It's about using your skills to push for change, but with responsibility, not just a power trip. You've got to balance the need to fix what's wrong with the impact on others. The crowd erupted in applause, a wave of approval that sent a thrill through Ethan's chest. The moderator, a tech journalist with a sharp smile and a notebook full of questions, nodded approvingly. That's the heart of innovation: solving problems, learning from mistakes, and making things better for everyone. Backstage peers swarmed Ethan, swapping stories of their own hacks and system tweaks. A 16-year-old from Boston, sporting a hoodie with a Linux logo, clapped him on the back. "You're a legend, man. Makes me want to audit my school's network." Fairness, right? Ethan laughed, but the lesson stuck. His code could spark change, but it needed a human touch, a consideration for the lives beyond the screen. James watched from the audience, his reserved demeanor softened by a swell of pride. His son wasn't just a coder, he was becoming a thinker, someone who weighed the code against the consequences, the fix against the fallout. As Ethan stepped off the stage, James met him with a rare grin. "You nailed it," he said simply, ruffling Ethan's hair in a gesture that felt both familiar and fleeting. "Keep that balance in mind, and you'll go far." Months later, back in Seattle, Ethan sat at his desk, his laptop open to a news article about Sky Vista's reforms. The airline had rolled out sweeping changes, transparent seat assignments, AI-driven fairness checks in their booking system, and mandatory empathy training for staff to ensure passengers were treated with respect, not as numbers in a queue. Sarah Mitchell, to Ethan's surprise, had been promoted to lead a customer experience team. Her perspective shifted by the ordeal. She'd even sent Ethan an email forwarded through the airline's customer service portal, thanking him for sparking change and wishing him luck with his coding. The $2.5 billion freeze had thawed into progress. A testament to how one small act, a teenager's refusal to back down, could ripple into systemic transformation. The lesson etched itself into Ethan's core, as clear and enduring as a well-commented line of code. Standing up against unfairness was vital, whether it was a seat on a plane, a flaw in a corporate system, or an inequity in the world beyond. His resourcefulness had turned a personal injustice into a catalyst for accountability, proving that one voice, even a 14-year-old's, could make giants like Sky Vista listen and adapt. But James's words lingered like a debug log. Every action had a human cost. Ethan's hack had exposed a critical flaw, but it had also disrupted lives, passengers missing birthdays, business travelers losing deals, parents delayed from seeing their kids. That responsibility was his, to carry a reminder, to wield his skills with precision and empathy. The airline's transformation showed what was possible when systems prioritized people over profits, adaptability over rigidity. It wasn't just about fixing code, it was about fixing trust, ensuring that technology and authority served fairness rather than undermined it. Ethan learned that true innovation wasn't just about breaking systems, but about building better ones that accounted for the human element, that valued every passenger, every person, as more than a data point. As he booted up his laptop for a new project, an open-source tool to help passengers track airline fairness metrics, he felt a quiet resolve. The world was full of broken systems, from glitchy software to biased policies. But with the right code, the right heart, and a touch of wisdom, he could help fix them one line at a time. His fingers hovered over the keyboard, ready to write not just code, but change, with a newfound balance of courage and care.